How have you minimized your needs in order to make other people happy? Or where have you set yourself on fire to keep others warm? That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode of I Buy Myself Flowers, the Reclamation season. I'm Allison Tibbs, and the Reclamation season is about reclaiming and returning to those parts of ourselves that we've abandoned in order to survive or to succeed or to be loved or chosen. In episode 1, we talked about how do we return back to those parts of ourselves that we thought were unlovable and messy. In episode 2, we talked about those overperforming parts of us that are so ready for rest, and we redefined what rest could mean for us and how it can create space for those other parts of us that we have pushed away, that they get a chance to come alive. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the part of ourselves that we tend to probably hide the most, and that's the part of us that has needs, and the part of us that is asking to be held and seen and acknowledged. But we tend to maybe push it away or silence it because we don't want to be seen as the person who is needy. We don't want to be seen as a person who is incapable because they have needs. We don't want to be seen as a person who can't do something because we are independent and we are the strong one and we are the one who always has the answers or gets things done, which is a great quality to have. But also, if we do it to the point that we ignore our own needs, then that becomes problematic. And I want to talk today about a period in my life where I had no choice but to let that part that had needs come to the forefront. Oftentimes we think that if we have needs, it makes us weak. It makes us a burden, or it makes us someone who is an annoyance. And I'll be honest, that's how I navigated most of my life. Being a person who was labeled as needy was probably the worst thing that I could ever have someone say about me, if I'm honest. Because I didn't want to be seen as a burden. I didn't want to be seen as weak. And so I overcorrected to make sure that I wasn't a burden. I would minimize my needs. I would act like my needs didn't matter. I would always make other people's needs more important than my own. And it's almost like I was settling for crumbs when it came to my own needs, but I would put everyone else's needs above my own. And I think part of it was it felt good. It felt good to show up for people. It felt good to be able to support people. But I realized a lot of times I would ask, well, who's supporting me? As I was going through my life, people just assumed that I didn't have needs. I started training people to completely ignore my needs or not even consider my needs, or even more, not even to think that I had needs at all. Even though, yes, I'm human, even though, yes, I go through things, people would always say, well, Allison, you just seem so put together. You just seem so solid right now. And they could see the things that I was going through in my life and they would just assume that I was okay. And the reality was I wasn't portraying a version of myself that needed help, that needed support, that needed care. But deep down, what I wanted was other people to notice. I wanted other people to show up for me the way I showed up for them. I wanted other people to ask if I needed help, not assume that I already had it controlled. And that all changed in my life. And I got the proof that being needy and having needs and not having it together and being quote unquote weak was in 2023, the season where the podcast stopped and where a lot of things stopped. And my therapist called this a life quake. And it was a moment in my life where, if I even think back to that time, it was still probably the lowest moment I've had in my life. My relationship had ended, and it broke me in a way that I don't think I knew that I could be broken. It completely changed, in my opinion, I feel like it changed my DNA. Something shifted. And it shifted internally because my relationship ended. I had to move out of the home that I'd lived in for 3, 4 years. At the same time, I was still recovering from being laid off from a dream role that I had where I was in LA filming content. I was building community, and I had this beautiful life, I thought. I was making more money than I ever had. I had an apartment in Hollywood. I had a home in San Francisco. I was traveling the world. I mean, everything was just really working itself out. And when the layoff happened and then the relationship ended, it was as if everything in my life had been stripped away. And it was so devastating. And I remember packing up all of my stuff and putting it into my car and driving to my dad's house. And I remember in that moment, it was, what am I going to do? What do I do now? And it was devastating, and it was soul crushing. It was awful. And it was awful because that chapter, or that mix of things falling apart, there was nothing I could have done to make it change. I couldn't work it to my advantage. I couldn't say anything to change the outcomes of what had just happened. I couldn't work harder to change the outcomes. I couldn't finagle my way or finesse my way into a better situation. I simply had to deal with the fact that everything that I'd held to be true and everything I'd built myself up to be was now gone. And there was nothing I could do about it. And for a person who is so used to producing and doing more and making things work and forcing things to happen, that was the first real wake-up call. But what it did was it stripped not just my physical experience away, but it stripped away all of those parts of me that had been protecting that needy part of me. Because for the first time in my life, I truly was in need. I was in need of strength. I was in need of literally a place to live. I was in need of financial support. I was in need of so many things. And it's funny, I remember for the first time, I truly let someone hold me. I get to my dad's house, and my brother was in town, who lives in Australia. He was in town. And my brother is about 10 years younger than me. And I remember my brother being the first one to greet me or to welcome me. And he just picked me up and just held me. Now, this was my baby brother. I used to change his diapers, but the way that he held me in that moment, because I was broken in every sense of the word, and him just having that moment to hold me, it was the first time in my life where I felt like I could come undone and not be perfect, not be put together, not be polished, not be anything else but who I was and where I was and what I was in that moment. And he said, "I'm so sorry." And he said, "I love you." And then he ran upstairs, got my dad. Then my dad came downstairs and he said, "You're home. You did the right thing." And he picked me up and he walked me up to the stairs where my stepmom was still in bed, and just laid me in the bed next to my stepmom. And then she held me. Now, at my big age of like 39, having that level of physical support and love and care, it truly healed something in me. It healed so many versions of me. It healed that 8-year-old girl. It healed the versions of me every single time that I went through a bad breakup and I wanted someone to hold me. It healed those versions of me. Every time that someone disrespected me or did me wrong or a business opportunity fell apart, even that version of me who got laid off a couple of years ago, that version got healed. And I think what happened was because I didn't have the mental or emotional or physical energy for my protectors of that needy part to show up, that the only version of me that was present was that needy version. And I just let it be. I let it breathe. I let it happen. I let that part of me be fully exposed and fully seen. And my whole life, I was afraid that that version of me would make me seem weak and make me seem incompetent or make me seem like a burden. I thought that version of me would be too vulnerable for me to share because it could be used against me somewhere down the line. And all of my fears in that moment disappeared. Because instead, what I learned was how loved I was, how supported I was. I learned that with everything that happened in my life, that I was still worthy and I was still lovable and I was still me, and that there was nothing wrong with me, and that it gave me permission to be a full human, if you will. And that gave me the courage to explore that version of me even more. Because all of my masks and all of my protectors and everything started to fade away, this softer, more vulnerable side of me came out. And I always think this is what happened. And I don't think it is what happened because I have friend groups from all different walks of life. But after that moment where I moved out and went to my dad's and did that, it was as if all of my friends from all different walks of life got on this master Zoom call and everyone decided how they were going to support me in their own way. And how my community showed up and how my friends showed up and how my family showed up for me in that season of me just being rock bottom and in full need was amazing. I had friends who would come to drop off a latte for me at my parents' house, who would take me for walks so I could get outside. My sister would make me meals and just deliver them to me on a tray as I would lay as a puddle on the floor. I had friends who would just sit on the phone with me as I cried. My mom would just be there, not saying a word, just sitting there in silence, allowing me to be in that moment. No one tried to fix anything. No one tried to fix me. Everyone just seemed to be in service to me in whatever capacity. I had clients who understood the severity of my situation and they canceled their sessions with me, but didn't cancel their payments. I had people who started recommending me to different opportunities, saying my name in meetings and rooms that I wasn't in. I had friends who lived in beautiful homes all over the world and would say, hey, why don't you come house sit for this week or this month? It was a beautiful time where I got to simply be in need. And never once did anyone make me feel less than or like a burden or like I was stupid or dumb. And I kind of wanted to kick myself thinking my whole life I was trying to avoid this moment. And maybe that's how life works, right? The thing that we try to avoid the most becomes the greatest lesson and the greatest medicine for us, because that's what that period did for me. And I don't think that I could have come to this realization if I wouldn't have gone through such a horrible, devastating moment in my life. I don't even think this podcast would have come to this relaunch without that period. I needed that period in order to let that part of me, that needy part of me, to come out, and it allowed me to reframe what it means to have needs. And what it helped me to realize for myself is that my needs matter just as much as everyone else's, because we all have needs. And we're not doing ourselves any favors by pretending that our needs don't exist, don't matter, or aren't as important as everyone else's. And I'm talking specifically to those people right now who have convinced themselves that that's true. You perform all the time, you produce all the time, you pretend like things don't bother you. You minimize what you really need. You push through when you're injured, when you're sick, when you're hurt, when you're heartbroken. The show must go on because you don't want people to think that you're not dependable or capable. You don't want people to see you cry. You don't want people to see your emotions. You keep your guard up all the time because you think that you're protecting yourself from being rejected or judged or disappointed. But honestly, it's only reinforcing something that doesn't support you. It's not healthy. And I wish I would have learned that earlier, but you know what? I didn't. And so here I am on the other side of it, and here I am now understanding it. And it has been such a game changer in how I navigate through the world. I mean, I used to be the person who felt awkward asking for more napkins at a restaurant because I didn't want to burden the server. I would be the person who would be in a massage and completely hate it, but wouldn't ask for lighter pressure or more pressure. And I would just endure the massage. I was always the no worries type of girl. When someone would say, hey, I actually can't do this thing, so can you take this project or take this task for me? And I'd say, no worries, I got it. When in fact, it was a big worry because now I was doing all these mental gymnastics to try to figure out how to make it work. I dismissed boundaries because I was afraid of people feeling like something was wrong with me. And I see now people do it all the time. And I see why they do it. There's some version of them that says, I just have to say yes. I have to do this. I have to do that because I don't want to be a burden. And we liken it to being resourceful and capable and all of these things, but that may not be true. You may be gaslighting yourself into believing all these things when in fact, what really needs to happen is that you need to acknowledge your needs. That belief that you hold, it turns into a pattern of being hyper independent, where you're so independent that you convince yourself that you don't need anyone's help or support. It's when you decide that you will do everything on your own. You won't ask for help. You won't delegate. You won't say no to certain things. You won't accept even minimal help. I remember for so long, I would always decline if especially a man would offer to lift my suitcase into the overhead compartment in an airplane. Or I'd always feel some type of way when someone would open a door for me. Or if someone saw me struggling carrying things and someone asked, oh, can I get that door for you? Or can I carry this for you? Or can I help you? I'd always say, no worries. No, I got it. When there are people who are actually there wanting to offer help and support to me, in some way or some reason, that voice says, no, don't accept the help. And I still don't quite understand in my version why that happened. But I did start to learn, I did start to realize that hyper independence was not serving me. I would teach people to stop offering help and to stop offering support. And where I started to see it show up even more, where that friction was happening with that hyper independence part of me, was in my romantic relationships. But the challenge that I was finding in romantic relationships is that I would attract people that wanted to support me. And I'm not a big fan of the 5 love languages, but I did realize that acts of service is actually the love language that I prefer. Like, I love in relationships when someone says, I got it, or I'll handle it. Like, I love it. And also, that part of me, that inner voice, that inner critic pops up when that needy part of me actually has needs, and it says, but that will make you weak. But no, but what will that require of you? Will that be used against you? And so I would have partners who offer to support me and offer to want to help me, and I always push it away. And that tension always created this rift in the relationship. And it's tough because when you have people in your life who love you and care about you and want to support you and want to show up for you, and you're constantly telling them no, or you're constantly pushing them away, or you're constantly declining their support, and not just in romantic relationships, but in your platonic relationships, in your work relationships, what I learned is that it creates this feeling of rejection from the other person. And that was a hard pill to swallow when I learned that me constantly declining or constantly pushing people away who are trying to support me, it was creating a block, or it was creating this lack of connection and intimacy with people. And the crazy thing is that deep down, all I wanted was someone to support me and to be there for me. I was creating something that I didn't actually want. And if you look at the patterns of hyperindependence, sometimes there are these underlying beliefs or underlying fears that show up. And we might believe that people actually can't support us. We may believe that people don't want to support us. We may believe that people won't support us the way that we want to. And honestly, that can be true. Because there have been moments where I needed support and someone offered it and it was actually the opposite of what I needed. And then I got more frustrated with that person. But at the end of the day, what I had to start learning was to simply let people help me and support me and show up for me. And I had to learn that it may not look the way that I would want it to look, but I had to acknowledge, like, wow, this person is trying their best to show up for me in the best way they know how. And that's worth something. And when you're super hyper independent, there's this control that you have to start to let go of. How I started, honestly, was anytime that I was on a plane and someone offered to help me put my luggage in the overhead compartment, I said yes. Anytime someone offered to help me carry something or offered to support me with something, I would say yes. And it was painful at times because that voice would still chime in. But I started to collect the data because every time that I said yes to that, what I learned is that nothing bad happened. And for the most part, none of it was ever used against me or brought back up. Now, sometimes it did, and that's okay. I had to be okay with that because I also realized that if someone was willing to flip the script back on me and try to make me feel bad for being vulnerable or make me feel bad for offering support or being offered support, I eventually learned that it had more to do with the other person than it did with me. And I couldn't let that experience become this confirmation of, see, I told you, because that's their issue. And I had to build up that belief and build up that resilience to it. Because I cared more about supporting that needy part of me. And I'm using the word needy now as not as a bad thing. Honestly, as just a real thing. Like, yes, in that moment, that part is being needy. And I find myself now in my relationships where I can actually articulate and say, I'm feeling needy right now. I'm feeling needy. This is what I need. And it's such a liberating thing to say, just to own it. I just own it. And I think also what happens is you start to get discernment on what are the needs that I can give myself? What are the needs that I'm going to have to rely on other people for because I really don't have the capacity, the knowledge, the skill set, or the resources to make it happen? And who shouldn't I go to for support? That level of discernment starts to happen because then you don't need to set yourself up for disappointment or failure. And you also start to get into the habit of, or more so the practice of asking for what you need. And one of the $1,000,000 questions that I often ask myself on a daily basis, and I encourage a lot of my clients when I work with them, is this $1,000,000 question of, what do I need right now? Because if you're so used to putting everyone else's needs in front of your own, then you stop asking yourself that question. And I remember asking this question to a woman that I was coaching. This was years ago. And she was a doula and a midwife. And she said to me, Allison, I am so good at being able to understand the needs of a baby based off of how it cries. I've been able to understand the needs of a new mother based off of her body language, based off of just these subtle things that most people don't pick up on. I'm really good at what I do. But when it comes to myself, I don't know at all how to decode my own needs. And I watched her have this revelation for herself. But it also gave me this revelation of why it's so important for us to constantly check in with ourselves and check in with, what do I need? And I used to put in my phone at 11:11, what do I need right now? That was the alarm that would go off. And when that alarm would go off, I would pause and I would check in with myself. And sometimes I needed a nap. Sometimes I needed to drink water. Sometimes I needed to go to the bathroom. Sometimes I needed to step away from the work. Sometimes I needed to call my mom. Sometimes I needed to eat something. Sometimes I needed to scream into a pillow. But just getting into the habit of asking myself that question once a day helped me to get more comfortable and remembering that I have needs and acknowledging that my needs matter, but starting to get clarity on what I actually needed. And then I started to get clarity around asking and communicating what I needed. So that's the practice, I would say. Because every episode I try to give you a practice. And I think the practice for this, it's two-part. It's one, getting connected to your needs. So once a day, setting an alarm and asking yourself, what do you need? That is the idea of self-care. It's the intentional practice of tending to your needs. But if you don't know what your needs are, then you can't tend to those needs and you definitely can't be intentional. So if you struggle with self-care, chances are you struggle with identifying your needs. So that's the first part, getting very clear on what your needs are. The second part is starting to give that part of yourself what you need, because then you'll build self-trust. So if I check in and I say, I need to drink some water, and I go and get myself water, that's self-care and that's self-trust. If I ask myself, what do I need? And I say that I need to go get water, but then I say, but I need to finish these emails, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. And we keep pushing our needs, a very basic need, which is hydration, back on the back burner, then we're not practicing self-care and we're not practicing self-trust. That means we can't trust ourselves to tend to our needs, so we'll just make our needs not matter. I've had clients tell me that they go a whole workday without even going to the bathroom, or they'll go a whole workday without eating because there's so much on their plate. There's so much that they have to do. There's so many demands of other people. So you're telling me that you are denying yourself of some of the most basic needs that you have because you're putting everyone else's needs above your own. That's problematic. That's hyper-independence turning into self-neglect. And I wish that for no one. So the practice is getting clear on what you need and then starting to tend to those needs in one way or the other. And if you can start that process, you build up that muscle. And then what happens is you start to get to a place where you can start to ask other people for support, or you can start to communicate what you need. And the graduation of the first practice is the practice of one clean ask. And the one clean ask is more so for you to get to once you get comfortable with noticing and getting clear on what you need. It's really hard to ask for what you need if you don't have clarity yet. And the needs that you may ask for can look many different ways. They can be emotional, they can be relational, they can be all different types of things. But the pattern or the practice looks something like this. I'm noticing blank. Would you be willing to blank? And I do that a lot in my relationship now because it really helps me to create more clarity. And it also helps me to get a little bit more specific on what I need. So I might say, listen, I'm noticing I'm feeling very overwhelmed right now. Would you be willing to just sit with me and just hold me for a little bit? Now, that's probably the most vulnerable thing that I could do. And I think 3 years ago, the version of me would have scoffed at the idea of me even saying that in a relationship to anyone. But now I do it to continue to flex that muscle and to give myself permission to have needs and permission to ask for what I need, not just from myself, but from others. And you keep doing it. And you keep honoring that. So here are some examples that you could use for this one clean ask. So you could ask, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Would you be willing to handle dinner tonight? I've been carrying this alone for a while. Can I talk it through with you for 10 minutes? I don't need advice right now. Would you be willing to listen and help me feel less alone in this moment? I'm needing reassurance. Can you just remind me that we're okay? I need more consistency in how we communicate. Would you be willing to agree on a regular time for us to check in? I need help with this project. Would you be willing to take responsibility for this specific piece? These are just a couple of examples that you could start to use, or you could craft your own. But that's the real practice. That's where I would love for you to get to, because I've been doing this now for a while, and it's been transformative, not just for myself, but it's been transformative in my relationships to other people. And what it does is it gives people permission to show up for me. It also releases them from this expectation that I have for them that I haven't communicated. And then I get upset and disappointed when they don't meet my expectations. And then I just go back into, never mind, I'll just do it myself. That circle, that spiral, that cycle is so detrimental to any person who is struggling with hyperindependence. And again, I'm saying hyperindependence. I am still a strong and independent person. I will always be that way. I was raised that way. I love that part of me. I love being that way in the world. And also, I can be a woman who has needs and who will have to depend on other people at various parts and stages of my life. I can be very successful at the work that I do, and I can delegate tasks to other people. Delegation has been probably, in a work sense, one of the best things I could have done for myself. Because most of my professional career, I spent my time priding myself on being a solopreneur and doing everything myself. Because in my mind it was, if I worked through it and struggled through it and all of these things and did it myself, one, it would be done exactly the way that I wanted. And it was like proving to myself and proving to the world that I could do it. But lately and recently, I've really leaned in to delegation. I now have a team that helps me to manage my business on a day-to-day basis, which was a bit terrifying to relinquish some control on how I do certain things in my business, but I also had to realize that I couldn't do everything on my own. Even this idea of the podcast and relaunching it, the last version of the podcast, I did everything. And now my team and we go through like a 10-step process to get this podcast completed. And yes, I could have done it, but I had so many other things on my plate that it would have made this podcast feel like a burden. And so now sharing the responsibilities, and now that I'm very clear on what I'm responsible for, they're clear on what they're responsible for. We even utilize certain tools and software to help automate things. So everything is actually happening now where I'm able to still show up and be present, but I'm not doing as much. And yes, I lose control over certain things, but also things get done and I have more space and capacity because I don't want to spend my every waking hour working. I want to enjoy the weekends. I want to enjoy my time in the evenings. I don't want to have to be working all the time on things. So delegating certain tasks to my team has been amazing. Utilizing AI. You can feel the way you want to feel about it, but I utilize AI in a way to delegate and automate tasks that take up so much of my time that now I have freedom and space to do other things. I don't have to do everything on my own all the time. But it first starts with being clear on what do you need, and then getting clear on how to make that need be met, whether it's people, processes, platforms, tools, whatever it is. Because at the end of the day, if I want you to take anything from what I've shared, is that your needs do matter. And you should be able to have your needs be met just as everyone else's needs are being met in your life. And usually you're the one meeting those needs. And I often say this, we have to stop lighting ourselves on fire to keep other people warm. It's not helpful, and it's going to lead to burnout and resentment and all of those things. And I never want anyone to experience that. So that's the work. That's the work, is acknowledging your needs, acknowledging that needy part of you, and allowing it to be seen and be brought to the forefront sometimes. It's realizing that being a needy person, it's acknowledging that having needs doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a burden. It doesn't make you incapable. It's building up the practice and the habit of getting clarity on what your needs are, and then tending to those needs. It also means getting clarity and discernment on who can support you and giving them an opportunity to show up for you and to start to reclaim that relationship, or at least that dynamic of the relationship. One thing that I do with my best friends is, we check in before, right? And so I might say, hey, listen, I'm having a rough day. Do you have space? Do you have capacity to hold some of this with me before I just go into, how rough my day was or whatever is happening? And you have to be honest, and you have to be accepting of if someone says, I don't have capacity right now. That's okay if they don't have capacity. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you, or that your needs aren't valid, or that you shouldn't have asked for support, because that's a beautiful thing. I love it when people can tell me, I don't have it today. I don't have the capacity to hold that, because what that's teaching me is that it's okay to have needs, and it's also okay to communicate your boundaries, and it's also okay to protect yourself. I love those people. When those people tell me that, I'm always like, oh, right. Because you're also human, and your cup may be full too. And so that practice has really helped to reframe that for me as well. So don't be upset if someone can't support you or they don't have the capacity. That need can still exist. And maybe you have to go to someone else or just sit with that for a moment. But it's okay. It's okay. So I don't want you to start doing these practices and then someone says no, or someone may not respond the way that you want. It doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's bad. Think of it as collecting data. Okay, I know when this person is stressed, I probably can't depend on them. I know that when I need someone to be super open to me being vulnerable and softer, I probably shouldn't go to them. Like, I know who I can go to for certain things now. And it happened by trial and error. But I was just collecting data, and I had to learn that if it didn't work out the way that I wanted to, it didn't mean that it was wrong. Because sometimes we think that when something is difficult or wrong, or it turns out different than the way that we expected, that we shouldn't pursue it, or that we shouldn't do it, or we shouldn't be consistent with it. Keep trying, keep practicing it. Build up that skill, build up that habit, rebuild that belief. Because on the other side of it is your needs start getting met. And when your needs get met, you move from neglected to a nourished version of you. And that's really what I want for everyone, because everyone deserves that. I always say everyone deserves to be happy. Everyone deserves to have their needs met. So as we wrap up, you know that. So as we wrap up, I'm going to grab the Nourish Life deck. Every episode we do one card, and this is just your parting gift. Something to think about, something to take not just this episode further, but just to give you something else to explore around how to support yourself and what you can do in this. And what's the one thing you would like to start doing to reclaim your time? What's one thing you'd like to stop doing to reclaim your time? I love this. I love this question because when I think about asking for help and delegating and needing other people to support you, this is also what's at the core of that. Because if there are things that you need, and if you are able to take that off of your plate, it allows you to reclaim more time for yourself. So if you need someone to support you on a project so you can work on something else, or if you need someone to step in to help you so you can maybe go to bed early or go to a workout class or to take a nap, there's so many things that can happen, but if you're always doing everything and you're constantly putting everything on your plate because you're afraid to ask for help or support or relief, then your time does not belong to you. So think about that. I love how this deck always gives us a great parting gift. The deck never lies. I would love to hear how this episode landed for you. I would love to hear how you are reclaiming not even the needy part of you, but reclaiming your needs and redefining what having needs truly means for you. I would love to hear how you are going to start delegating or asking for help. I would love to hear how you're building practices into intentionally tending to your needs. And I would love to hear what you are doing once you've reclaimed some time for yourself. So as always, thank you so much for being with me on this journey, for being with me here in this episode. We have a few more episodes left in this season. So stay tuned, keep coming back, and have a great rest of your day.